Assassin's Creed Shadows on Xbox Series S versus X versus PS5 versus PS5 Pro. Let's get straight to the point and talk about how this game runs on all four consoles. Starting with the game size, it's 108.4 gigabytes on Xbox and 103.1 gigabytes on PlayStation. Still a large game on both platforms, so make sure you have the space. Loading times are up next. Continuing the game from dashboard here, our four consoles are pretty much neck and neck. Series X is the winner though, but only by 1 second. Both the PS5 consoles are exactly the same at about 53 seconds, and the Series S is the slowest, taking 54 seconds. This being a single player game, Xbox does have a big advantage, and that's quick resume. You can be playing a totally different game like Monster Hunter Wilds and get back into Shadows in about 8 to 10 seconds. Back in 2020, I remember there were rumors about quick resume coming to PS5, but that's never happened, and at this point it likely won't happen until PlayStation 6. This game's gotten decent reviews. I personally rated it 8.5 out of 10 during my initial review, and most of the scores are average around 8 to 8.5. Shadows isn't perfect. I mean, combat does get repetitive and isn't as deep as some other similar games like Ghost of Tsushima. Heck, even Rise of the Ronin's combat can feel deeper than Shadows. All the quests, the side missions, they can all get repetitive fairly quickly as well, but still, there's enough good things here making it one of the better Ubisoft games in years. Perhaps the best thing about this game are the visuals, the graphics. It's a really good looking game. Sitting atop a viewpoint looking far into the distance looks scenic. Running through dense forests with all kinds of shadows and lighting, that also looks, some of the best visuals I've seen in a while. Let's have a closer look at the graphics and resolution comparison on all four consoles. Here's the chart directly from Ubisoft that lays out all the different modes and settings on every single console. Xbox Series S has no graphic mode selection. There's just the one default quality mode, and that targets 30 FPS. Resolution is 1620p upscaled using TAA, while the native hovers between 720p and 1080p. The game doesn't look too bad really, it's quite playable. Ray tracing meant to be selective here, which essentially means there's really no ray tracing shadows and lighting during the open world. When you're in that sandbox, that tiny map, basically your hideout, that's really where the Series S or the selective ray tracing occurs. But during the main game, the open world, there is no ray tracing. Visually, you can clearly see the difference here between the weaker Series S and the more powerful Series X. Lighting and shadows make a big difference here. The Series X having that standard lighting and shadows during the open world, and the hair looks much better on the Series X quality mode. Series X does have a 60 FPS performance mode, which in a way kind of looks similar to the 30 FPS mode on the Series S. Similar hair physics, similar native resolution, and of course no ray tracing in the open world. Let's now compare the three more powerful consoles, the Series X versus PS5 versus PS5 Pro. Quality mode is 4K upscaled using TAA on all three consoles. Native resolutions around 1500p on all three and 30 FPS across the board. Here we have standard ray tracing on the Series X PS5, while the PS5 Pro gets extended ray tracing. The big disappointment for the PS5 Pro is really there's no PSSR. There's rumors that the PS5 Pro might get PSSR in a patch that's coming later, but for now the only real advantage in quality mode is the improved ray tracing, shadows and lighting you get with that extended ray tracing that they're calling. If you look closely at some of these zoomed in shots, the Series X and PS5 actually look slightly sharper than the PS5 Pro at times. There's also a 60 FPS performance mode on the Series X, PS5 and PS5 Pro. That also targets 4K upscaled using TAA as well, similar to quality, but the native resolution is lower of course at around 1080p. Series X and PS5 do not have ray tracing during the open world here, so it's kind of going back to that selective or no ray tracing that we saw on the Series S. While the PS5 Pro, you still get those ray tracing shadows and lightings, and that's where the biggest advantage is for the Pro. Shadows and lighting look much better in that highly desirable 60 FPS mode. There is a third graphics mode on the Series X, PS5 and the Pro. That's balance. You do need a 120Hz display for this setting. Visually, it's essentially the same as quality mode, but now you get a higher 40 FPS. For best results, you should have a 4K 120Hz TV for this, especially on the Series X, where the HDR is essentially tied to the 4K setting. Now, a bit of a warning, the footage you see here for balance mode is captured at 1080p. There's no capture card on the market capable of recording 4K at 120Hz. You also see the dull image quality on the Series X, and that's because the Xbox's HDR is tied to 4K output resolution. Now, this whole ray tracing setting thing can be a bit confusing, so I want to show how selective versus standard versus extended ray tracing looks. You can see that right here, the clear difference between how you get that improvement as you move from selective to standard to extended on the PS5 Pro. PS5 Pro does make the game look a lot more vibrant just from that improved shadows and lightings, and perhaps the biggest advantage is during that performance mode. It's going to be interesting to see if a future PSSR patch gives the Pro an even bigger advantage. Now let's talk about the FPS, the performance. This is going to be a quick analysis since this game is really well optimized. There's really no major issues or concerns here. Heck, even the portable Steam Deck runs this well at around 30 FPS, and the game looks decent on that smaller portable screen. Xbox Series S has just that one and only default quality mode, which delivers a solid 30 FPS, no drops, no issues. It's all smooth sailing. Same thing for the other three, Xbox Series X, PS5, PS5 Pro, 30 FPS locked during quality mode as well. Next up is performance mode, and that pretty much runs well on all three consoles. It's a solid lock 60 without any major issues, but there is one thing I want to point out. Xbox Series X does get drops at times. It's not major, only a single frame, but it's there. Time after time after time, I saw the counter drop to 59 FPS on the X, while the PS5 consoles stay frozen at a locked 60. This could simply be the Series X just favoring a higher native during that upscaling. I mean, it's not a major concern here. A single frame, I mean, no one in this world is gonna notice that while playing. But hey, in a video like this, when I see a drop, I have to point it out, regardless of how small that drop is. A few other things I want to mention here. One of those is cutscenes. During cutscenes, it seems the game kind of defaults down to quality mode, so all of them are at 30 FPS. And then there's the hideout. This is that small area where you can travel into it and you can kind of build out your base. There's a building aspect. And inside of the hideout, regardless whether you have quality or 60 FPS performance selected, in that hideout, it's all going to default down to that 30 FPS quality mode. So that's what you need to know about Assassin's Creed Shadows on Xbox Series S versus X versus PS5 versus PS5 Pro. A good looking, well optimized game on every single platform. A lot better than past Ubisoft releases like Star Wars Outlaws. I mean, that game had some issues. Heck, even Avatar Frontiers of Pandora had performance issues, but Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft took their time with it and made sure they delivered a finished and polished product. It's really how every AAA game should be released.